it turns out that the energies being released in these types of experiments are thousands of times more than those energies, those bonding energies. It can't be ordinary chemistry. It's got to be something else. And since there's nuclear evidence, tritium, neutrons, other things, it's, as far as I'm concerned, in May of '91, I was definitely of that opinion, and I'm even more strongly of that opinion now. It's definitely a new nuclear process of still unknown and agreed upon, certainly, mechanism. Okay, what have I been doing since then? Well, I've been involved in this effort to gather petition names so that we can overturn the outrageous attacks against cold fusion, which all emerge from this worthless document, which was signed by a bunch of negativists for the Department of Energy. The co-chairman of this ERAB panel in November of 1989, who came up with this, Dr. John Huizenga, Professor John Huizenga of the University of Rochester, now has a book out. It will be out soon, and we'll all have great laughs reading it, because its title is Cold Fusion, Scientific Fiasco of the Century. I suggest to you that Dr. Huizenga's book will be called The Publishing Fiasco of the Century, because right at about the time that his book is being published, and soon thereafter, the evidence and products and mechanism for cold fusion will be so overwhelming that all we will have is the whining of people like Huizenga as they go dashing off to their corner to recant in private, or die with it, because as you know, the history of science shows, people sometimes never admit that they were wrong. So I've been trying to help the cause by getting this DOE report invalidated. What this report has done is to literally shut off money for funding cold fusion in the United States. Indeed, it's being done bootleg fashion in federal laboratories. People have to sneak around, and people are courageous and do it. There are some labs, Navy labs and so forth, where it is being done a bit more above board. But this is not right to have the central agency for energy in the United States to be mocking this, literally mocking it and attacking it. We have disgraceful correspondence from Dr. Walter Polanski. Is he here, by the way? I've never met the man, I've had correspondence, but it's basically, it's always like, read our report, read our report. And we say we'll provide money, just give us the proposals. It would never be fair. Here's Dr. Giuliano Preparata emerging. It's okay, I've had a lot to say.
Washington traffic.
I didn't have to be that embarrassed about taking extra time. What I will do is I will say a few more remarks, which will go on and on too. I'll let Giuliano rest up a little bit from his dash here. We do have to acknowledge that cold fusion is indeed under attack, okay? Now those of us who have been under attack and been made fun of for pursuing this science, and by the way, I'm doing my own experiments now in my basement, okay? To replicate, I and others who are helping me, to replicate this experiment in Japan. Isn't that funny? That we have to get $10,000 worth of money to do an experiment in the basement in Bow, New Hampshire, indeed supported by many fine scientists from the MIT community and elsewhere, around the United States, by the way, giving me advice as to how to do this. Okay, I have my own ideas, and I'm drilling things and doing and working, because I've worked in labs myself. But the idea that DOE isn't instantly there, based on reports like this, to find out what's going on, wait till Congress really gets to the bottom of it. I'm waiting for that day with great relish. But you're not going to hear anything from them for a while. They're hiding there. They've got their $500 million obsolete hot fusion program to protect. So we do have to acknowledge that it's under attack. Nature magazine basically has not devoted the coverage that it should to it, and in fact has attacked it. It has not put positive articles on cold fusion in. It hasn't reported the Como conference. I don't think that the magazine Science has been a heck of a lot better. In fact, they recently had yet another article by that infamous unbiased journalist Gary Taubes reporting on Dr. Fleischmann's visit in California. Another disgrace. At least they publish correspondence, I notice, on cold fusion, whereas positive correspondence on cold fusion. Nature will not even put in a letter that is a technical letter that suggests there are major flaws in the Caltech experiment. 3 independent electrochemists have now found this major flaw. A high school student can be shown what the flaw is. They will not publish it. Arthur C. Clarke wrote to John Maddox, and Maddox says, we don't have the time for a review. It would take a lot of energy and so forth. Well, John, just publish the letters. We'll be satisfied with that. And while you're at it, you might review Fire from Ice, because after all, you did review the close MIT-generated book, Too Hot to Handle. All right. What are some of the remarks? Just to give you a flavor for this, because some of you really have not seen this firsthand, so you probably don't know the depth. You're hearing the depth of passion against it. But what prompts this? And why am I getting heated about this? Because a professor at MIT who helped launch the attack against Pons and Fleischmann, by the name of Professor Ronald Ballinger, said this, and he wrote this. This is published in the Gordon Institute proceedings. That's not the Gordon Institute of the summer seminars, don't get it confused. It's an engineering place north of Boston. He said, it would not matter to me if 1,000 other investigations were to subsequently perform experiments that see excess heat. These results may all be correct, but it would be an insult to these investigators to connect them with Pons and Fleischmann. And from Watkins himself, James Watkins, U.S. Secretary of Energy, in January of 1990. I think it is very premature at this time to say that we are losing a race in cold fusion when we have very clearly validated that we are not sure that it is fusion. That's the United States Secretary of Energy. And I met him at MIT recently, by the way, and I have a transcription of that encounter. He's relying on his hot fusion colleagues. Happer, one of them, is a Princeton guy who has got his name on this infamous report. And this is the guy that's advising him about Japanese experiments. In fact, he went on and on in talking to me about how Happer had gone to Japan and found them so flawed and so backward in their basic research. Well, they're not backward in one way. They're doing cold fusion research. Cold fusion is discussed in their major newspapers, and it's in their edition of Scientific American. So, Admiral Watkins, wake up. And MIT physics professor emeritus Martin Deutsch in May of '89 said of cold fusion, in one word, it's garbage. And then, of course, the great Robert Park, who has not found a week where he couldn't find a bad word for cold fusion. He says, most screwy ideas turn out to be screwy. Cold fusion was preposterous to begin with. And he called the first annual meeting of cold fusion at Salt Lake City, where he wasn't even present. He called it on national television a seance of true believers. And I could go on, but John Maddox, who's the editor of Nature, who I think may have to resign eventually over this, or at least change his magazine's name or something, he basically said this on the NOVA program, which we helped get canceled. I convinced the editors that it was such a travesty that they shouldn't be broadcasted. This is what he said. This is the final word of Nature on cold fusion. Even as all these experimental results come in, even a volume published by the American Institute of Physics, 1,000 pages, okay? But this is what Maddox, the great scientist Maddox, says. I think it will turn out after 2 or 3 years more investigation that this is just spurious and unconnected with anything you could call nuclear fusion, thermonuclear fusion. I think that broadly speaking, it's dead and will remain dead for a long, long time. I think he's really afraid that it will rise and come out of the grave and bite him, and in fact, it will. There are good magazines, however. The journal Fusion Technology, which is regularly publishing cold fusion research. It was formerly 100% hot fusion. Now it's about 30 to 50%. It varies. Sometimes it was 100% cold fusion articles. Published by the American Nuclear Society under the courageous leadership of George Miley.